My husband called me from his business trip, but the police said he died 2 days ago. My husband called me from his business trip, but the police said he died 2 days ago. I still remember that night like it was carved into my bones. The phone lit up on the nightstand at 11:47 p.m., his name glowing across the screen, Marcus. My heart jumped the way it always did when he called late, that soft warmth of missing someone mixed with the quiet comfort of routine. I smiled before I even answered. "Hey, baby," I said, but the line was thick with static, that fuzzy kind that makes you lean in like you can listen your way through it. I heard his breath first, slow, uneven, and then his voice low and tired saying, "I love you, Leah. Just remember that, okay?" And before I could ask anything, before I could even say I love you too, the line went dead. First, I thought it was just a bad connection. He told me the hotel Wi-Fi was terrible, and that the cell towers out there barely worked. I went back to sleep thinking he'd text me in the morning like always, but when morning came my phone stayed silent. No text. No good morning voice note. No miss you, babe. Just silence. I brewed my coffee, tried to shake off the unease crawling at the back of my neck, told myself not to be dramatic. But that silence kept growing, stretching longer with every passing hour until it felt like it was sitting right beside me at the kitchen table. By noon I couldn't take it anymore. I called his number again. Straight to voicemail. I called the hotel front desk, and the woman there told me in a cheerful voice that Mr. Henderson had checked out 2 days ago. My stomach dropped so hard I had to sit down. "Checked out?" I asked. "No, he's supposed to be there until Friday." She hesitated, then said softly, "Ma'am, he left early Monday morning." Monday. 2 days ago. That was when I heard the knock on the door. 2 officers stood outside, hats in their hands, faces carrying that polite heaviness that only means one thing. I didn't even have to hear the words before my knees buckled. They said there'd been an accident on the highway near Nashville. A truck, bad weather, no survivors. They said my husband's body was identified yesterday. Yesterday, which meant he'd been dead when he called me. Everything after that turned into noise. I remember the sound of my own breathing, fast and shallow, the way the walls seemed to lean in on me. The officers kept talking, words like arrangements and next of kin and confirmation, but none of it made sense. I kept replaying his voice in my head, that last whisper through the static. "I love you, Leah. Just remember that." For 2 days I didn't leave the house. I didn't eat. I didn't cry. I just sat there on the couch, phone in my hand, staring at the call log like maybe if I looked long enough it would disappear. But it was real, the timestamp, the duration, everything. 11:47 p.m. Exactly 36 hours after the time they said he died. When the funeral came, I walked through it like I was moving underwater. Everyone's faces blurred together. His mother clutching my hands, his brother reading scripture. The soft murmur of condolences that all sounded like the same hollow echo. I wanted to scream, to ask someone if they'd ever heard of a dead man making a phone call. But I kept my mouth shut. Because how do you tell people something like that without sounding insane? After the burial, the house felt emptier than I'd ever known it could. Every creak in the floorboards, every flicker of the lights felt like a whisper. I started hearing things, soft thuds upstairs, footsteps down the hall at night. I told myself it was grief. I told myself my mind was just trying to fill the silence he left behind. But then the text started. The first one came 3 nights later. "Did you get home safe?" That's what it said. Simple. Normal. Like any husband would text his wife. Except the message came from Marcus's number. My hands trembled so hard I dropped the phone. I didn't reply at first. I just stared at it, heart pounding, breath stuck somewhere between my ribs. I thought maybe it was a cruel prank. Maybe someone found his phone. But when I finally worked up the nerve to text back, "Who is this?" the reply came instantly. "It's me, baby." I wanted to believe it. God knows I did. I even typed out, "Marcus, where are you?" But I couldn't hit send. Because deep down under the hope clawing at my chest, I felt something darker. Something off. I deleted the message and called his phone again. Straight to voicemail. But when I checked my call log afterward, the timestamp for his call from that night, the one before the police came, was gone. Completely gone. That was when I started keeping a notebook. I wrote everything down, the time of the texts, the words, the weird little things around the house. Lights flickering at 11:47. The sound of the front door opening even when it was locked. The smell of his cologne lingering in the hallway, strong and fresh like he just walked by. I thought I was losing my mind. So I went to Pastor Reed, hoping for some kind of comfort. But when I told him what was happening, he looked at me like he was afraid. Sometimes, he said quietly, the dead don't know they're gone. I laughed then, a shaky, nervous laugh, because how could I take that seriously? But that night, when I went to bed, I dreamed of Marcus standing at the foot of the bed, soaked in rain, whispering, "You have to find the truth, Leah." And when I woke up, there was a wet footprint on the floor. Just one, right where he'd been standing in my dream. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was just grief. Something was wrong. Something didn't add up. The accident, the call, the text, none of it fit. So I started digging. He told me he was going to Nashville for a business deal. But when I called his office, they said there was no such trip scheduled. He'd taken personal leave. I checked our bank statements and saw a hotel charge, but not in Nashville, in Memphis. A place called the Riverside Inn. My heart dropped again because that's where we spent our first anniversary. I remembered the balcony overlooking the water, the jazz band that played every night. Why would he go there alone? I booked a ticket the next morning. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just packed a bag, took the notebook, and left. The drive from Atlanta to Memphis felt endless. Every highway sign looked like it was written in fog. Every rest stop felt too quiet. When I finally pulled into the Riverside Inn, the air smelled exactly the same, like rain and magnolias. At the front desk, I told the clerk I was there to pick up some of my husband's things. She gave me a sympathetic smile and handed me a small box. Inside were his watch, his wallet, and his wedding ring. The same ring they said they found at the crash site. My heart stopped. "Where did you get this?" I asked. She blinked. "From his room, ma'am. He left it in the safe." That's when everything inside me went cold. If his ring was in the safe, whose body did they bury? I checked into the same room that night. Room 214. I couldn't sleep. The air felt thick, like the walls were holding their breath. Around midnight, the phone in the room rang. I froze. My own phone was on silent in my purse, so it wasn't that. The hotel phone. It rang again. 3 times. I picked it up, hand shaking, and whispered, "Hello." Static. Then that same voice, faint, distant, trembling. "Leah." I screamed and dropped the receiver. When I picked it back up, the line was dead. I stared at the phone for what felt like hours, until I realized the cord wasn't even plugged into the wall. That's where I should have run. I should have packed my bag and left that place. But something told me to stay, to wait. Because deep down, I knew he was trying to tell me something. And that's how the long night began. The night I found out what really happened to my husband. That's how the long night began. The night I found out what really happened to my husband. I remember sitting on that hotel bed with the lamp throwing that tired yellow glow against the wallpaper. My heart beating so loud I could hear it echo inside my ears. I kept staring at the unplugged phone, the coiled cord hanging limp like a dead snake, thinking maybe I'd lost my mind for real this time. I told myself, "Leah, grief can play tricks, don't go chasing ghosts." But then I looked down at the box they'd given me. The ring, the watch, the wallet. And I swear the second hand on that watch twitched forward, even though it hadn't ticked since the day they gave it to me. I whispered his name, just a breath of it. Marcus. And for a heartbeat, the air in that room shifted. Like the temperature dropped a few degrees and the shadows along the curtain deepened. I got up and went to the balcony, pulled the curtain aside. The river was dark, reflecting a thin slice of moonlight. It looked peaceful, too peaceful. And I caught myself thinking how strange it was that something could look so calm while everything inside me was chaos. That was when I saw the car, parked across the street, half hidden under a tree. Headlights off, engine idling. I wouldn't have noticed if it hadn't been for the faint orange glow of a cigarette ember flaring, dying, flaring again. Someone was sitting in there watching the hotel. Watching me. I felt it in my bones. I closed the curtain fast, locked the balcony door, and sat back down. My mind was racing. What if Marcus wasn't dead? What if he faked his death? But why? And who was in that car? I forced myself to open his wallet. His ID was still there, the same photo I'd stared at 1,000 times. The same smile. But tucked behind it, folded small, was something I'd never seen before. A motel receipt. Not from Memphis. From a place 2 hours north, dated the day before the crash. And the name written under guest signature wasn't his handwriting. The longer I looked, the more that receipt burned holes in my mind. Something was wrong, deeply, dangerously wrong. I couldn't sit still anymore. So I put on my coat and slipped out of the room, careful to keep my head down as I passed the lobby. The clerk gave me a nod but didn't ask questions. Outside, the car was gone. I drove toward the motel on the receipt, an old highway cutting through the woods. The rain started halfway there, soft at first, then harder, drumming on the windshield like warning fingers. My GPS kept glitching out, rerouting me in circles, until finally the road opened onto a faded sign that read Lakeview Motor Lodge. Half the letters were burned out. The parking lot was empty except for a rusted pickup and an old soda machine buzzing like a dying insect. Inside, the lobby smelled like cigarettes and lemon cleaner. The woman behind the counter looked half asleep until I showed her the receipt. "Do you remember this man?" I asked. She squinted at the photo of Marcus on my phone, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, he was here last week. Checked in with a woman." I felt my stomach twist. A woman. Pretty thing. Wore a red coat. They left together early Monday morning. The same morning he supposedly died. I asked if she remembered anything else, but she just shrugged, said they paid cash and didn't stay long. Before I left, I asked if I could see the registry. She hesitated, then slid it over. There it was, Marcus Henderson, and next to it, guest L. Carter. My initials. My last name before marriage. I don't even remember driving back to the hotel. My hands were trembling so bad I nearly missed the exit. I just kept replaying that name in my head, L. Carter, like some cruel joke written by the universe. Was it a coincidence? Was someone pretending to be me? Or was Marcus involved in something I couldn't understand? When I reached the room again, the door was open. Just slightly, a crack wide enough to let the light spill into the hallway. My breath caught. I pushed it open and whispered, "Hello." Nothing. I stepped inside and froze. The box with Marcus's belongings was on the bed, but the ring was gone. I searched everywhere, the floor, under the pillows, the nightstand. Gone. Then I noticed something else. The notebook I'd been writing in, the one I brought from home. It was lying open on the desk, flipped to the very last page. And scrawled across it, in handwriting that wasn't mine, were the words, "Don't trust the call." I stumbled back, heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. I grabbed my keys and bolted out of that room, down the hall, out into the rain. I didn't stop until I reached my car. My mind kept spinning. Don't trust the call. What call? The one he made before he died? Or the one from the hotel phone? I sat there for a long time, rain sliding down the windshield in rivers, trying to decide whether to drive home or to the police. But something deep inside me whispered, keep going. So I called the officer who'd handled the accident, a man named Detective Harris. He sounded surprised to hear from me. When I told him about the phone call, the text, the hotel ring, he went quiet. Then he said, "Mrs. Henderson, I think you need to come in tomorrow morning. There's something you should see." That night I didn't sleep. Every creak in the hallway made me flinch. I kept the lights on and the notebook clutched to my chest. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the lamp flickered 3 times. Then my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. I answered before I could think. "Hello." Static again. Then a whisper. "Leah, you're not safe." My whole body went cold. "Marcus? Is that you?" But the line went dead. I dropped the phone, ran to the door, and double-locked it. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely breathe. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but who could I even explain this to? I sat there until sunrise, staring at the window, waiting for something else to happen. At dawn I drove straight to the police station. Detective Harris met me in a small gray room, coffee in one hand, file in the other. He looked tired, like he'd been up all night too. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, "there's been a development." He opened the file and slid a photo across the table. It was Marcus's car, what was left of it. Twisted metal, shattered glass. "We recovered new evidence from the crash site," he said. "This was lodged under the driver's seat." He pushed over a charred piece of metal shaped like a locket. I recognized it instantly. It was mine. The one I lost months ago on our anniversary trip to Memphis. I thought I dropped it in the river, I whispered. That's what I thought too, he said. But here's the strange thing. We found no trace of your husband's fingerprints on the steering wheel. None. The prints belonged to an unidentified female. I felt the room tilt around me. So, he wasn't driving? He shook his head. We think someone else was with him. Maybe the woman from the motel. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come out. Then where is she? He looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, "That's what we're trying to figure out." But Mrs. Henderson, whoever she was, she didn't survive either. I left the station numb. None of it made sense. Marcus wasn't driving, but he was dead. A woman was with him, but she signed in under my name. And somehow I got a phone call from a dead man. That evening I drove home, every streetlight blurring through my tears. When I reached my house, the porch light was on. I hadn't left it that way. I unlocked the door slowly, stepped inside. Everything looked normal, except the faint scent of Marcus's cologne floating in the air again. That warm, spicy smell that used to fill the bedroom every morning. My knees gave out. I sank onto the couch and whispered, "Marcus, if you're here, please, just tell me what's happening." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush me. Then thud. Stairs. I froze. Another thud. Slow, deliberate. Footsteps. I grabbed the first thing I could, a fireplace poker, and crept up the stairs, heart hammering. The hallway light flickered once, then steadied. The sound came from our bedroom. The door was slightly open. I pushed it gently, inch by inch. And there on the dresser was his ring. The same ring that had vanished from the hotel room. I whispered his name again, tears spilling down my face. "Marcus?" The air in the room thickened. The curtains rustled though the windows were closed, and faintly, just faintly, I heard his voice, not from any direction but from everywhere. "Find her, Leah. Before she finds you." Then the lamp shattered. I screamed and ran out of the room, down the stairs, out the door into the night. I didn't stop running until I reached the street. My neighbor, Mrs. Cooper, saw me and came rushing out in her robe, asking what happened. But all I could do was point back at the house and whisper, "He's still in there." She didn't believe me, of course. Nobody would. But that night, as I sat in her living room trembling, I decided one thing. If Marcus wanted me to find someone, her, then that's what I'd do. Even if it killed me. The next morning I started digging again. I went through his emails, his call logs, every scrap of paper he ever left behind. And that's when I found it. A hidden folder on his laptop labeled Bluebird. Inside were dozens of encrypted files, but one wasn't locked. A video. When I played it, my whole body went numb. It was Marcus sitting in a dim hotel room, looking straight at the camera. He looked scared. "If you're watching this, Leah," he said, "it means she found me." He swallowed hard. "Her name isn't what you think. And I'm not who you think I am either. I tried to protect you, but it's too late. Don't trust anyone. Especially not." The video cut off. I replayed it a dozen times, but it ended at the same moment every time. Right after "especially not." I threw the laptop shut and just sat there shaking, because there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not love. Not fear. Guilt. That's when I realized I didn't really know my husband at all. I sat there with the laptop open on my knees, the glow from the frozen video still washing his face across the screen. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt anger instead of grief. The kind of anger that hums under the skin, quiet but sharp. What had he done? Who was she? And what did he mean, "not who you think I am"? The words rolled around in my head until they started to lose meaning. The house was too quiet, the air too still. I closed the laptop, stood, and walked to the window. Morning light was just starting to break, thin and gray, the kind that makes the world look hollow. Across the street, a figure was standing by the lamppost. A woman, maybe in a red coat. I blinked and she was gone. I tried to shake it off. I told myself I needed proof, not shadows. So I called Detective Harris again, told him about the video. He said to bring the laptop in, but I couldn't. Something in me didn't trust him, or maybe I didn't trust anyone anymore. Instead, I copied the file to a flash drive and left the house, heart hammering. The ring still lying on the dresser upstairs like a question I couldn't answer. The drive downtown blurred by. Every time I stopped at a light, I checked the mirror. Once I could have sworn the same gray sedan was behind me for 3 turns in a row. When I turned off suddenly toward the river, it kept going straight, but the feeling it left in my chest didn't. I parked near the library, went inside, found a corner computer, and plugged in the flash drive. The file opened again, but now the first 10 seconds were gone. Just static. I leaned closer, desperate, and then the screen flickered and froze on a single frame. Marcus's eyes wide, terrified, looking at something behind the camera. Then black. Behind me, a chair
creaked. I turned, but no one was there, just rows of books and the hum of the old fluorescent lights. I whispered, "Marcus, what are you trying to tell me?" And for a heartbeat, in the reflection of the dark monitor, I saw him standing over my shoulder. For a heartbeat, in the reflection of that black monitor, I thought I saw him standing behind me, but when I blinked, it was only the outline of a bookshelf. That was the moment I decided I couldn't keep chasing shadows. Whatever was happening had to have a real explanation. Someone was using his name, his voice, his number, someone who wanted something from me. I copied every file from the flash drive onto a folder on the library desktop, printed the metadata report, and tucked it into my purse. Then I walked straight out into the bright morning air, telling myself to breathe like a normal person. The city noise helped. It reminded me the world was still ordinary, that I wasn't drifting into madness. I found a cafe across the street and sat by the window with my notebook open. The page looked like a web of half-truths. Red coat, motel receipt, video, L. Carter. I circled the initials again. If someone had used my name, maybe they'd used my identity too. That thought hit harder than any ghost story ever could. I called the bank. The clerk said there'd been an attempted withdrawal from our joint account a week after Marcus's death. Someone using an old signature card, one that hadn't been valid for years. The request was denied, but the attempt came from Memphis. I asked if they had a camera feed. They did, but I'd need a subpoena to view it. I hung up, staring at the phone, realizing that whoever this was had access to everything. Our accounts, his passwords, my maiden name, maybe even his phone. That could explain the call, the texts, all of it. By late afternoon, I was sitting in my car outside the Riverside Inn again, watching people come and go. I waited for something familiar, a face, a car, a clue, but the longer I waited, the more ordinary everything seemed. The same clerk from before came out to smoke. I decided to ask one more question. When she saw me, she gave a little nervous smile. "Back again?" "I just need to know," I said. "The woman Marcus was with. Did she say anything? Did you hear her name?" The clerk thought for a second. "I think he called her Lena or Leah, something like that." The sound of my own name coming from her mouth made my skin crawl. I thanked her and walked back to my car in a fog. The sky was turning that color it gets before rain, silver and low. I sat there gripping the wheel, trying to make sense of it. If someone had been pretending to be me, that meant they'd been close enough to know the details. Our anniversary spot, my name, even my jewelry. The locket found in the car suddenly made sense. It had been mine once. Maybe Marcus had kept it. Maybe she'd stolen it. And then the awful thought, maybe Marcus hadn't been innocent. If he was running from someone, if he'd been with a woman using my name, maybe he'd been part of something bigger. Fraud, identity theft, something that had gone wrong. That would explain his fear in the video, the words "don't trust the call." Maybe he tried to warn me before everything collapsed. I opened my notebook again and wrote 3 words underlined twice. Follow the money. It was the first time I'd felt clear in days. I drove straight to our accountant's office, an older man named Barnes who'd handled Marcus's business for years. When I walked in, his face went pale, like he'd seen a ghost. Or rather, like he was afraid he might. I told him I needed access to Marcus's company records. He hesitated. "Mrs. Henderson, that might not be a good idea." "Why not?" "Because your husband closed the company accounts 3 weeks before his trip. Everything was liquidated." "Liquidated where?" He looked down at his hands. "An offshore account. Cayman Islands." The room tilted again. That slow spinning feeling of realizing the person you loved most had lived an entire life behind a door you never opened. I forced my voice to stay calm. "And you didn't think to tell me?" I assumed you knew, he said softly. He said you'd signed off on it. That's when I understood why someone had used my name. That's when I understood why someone had used my name. They needed a signature, one that would look clean on paper and survive a surface check. Marcus had always been the one who handled the paperwork. I trusted him with every form, every password. If he'd scanned or stored my ID anywhere, it would have been easy for someone close to him to pull it. Barnes kept talking, saying things about closing balances and transfers, but all I could hear was the pulse in my ears. When I finally stood, he tried to stop me. Mrs. Henderson, he said, whatever Marcus was involved in, it wasn't small. He owed people money, dangerous people I didn't ask who. I just walked out. The air outside felt too thin, like the city had lost its oxygen. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white, and whispered to myself, he was trying to protect me. That's what the call meant. Back home, I pulled out the file of statements he used to keep in the desk drawer. Most of them were boring. Receipts, invoices, the regular noise of a business. But tucked in the back was a business card, smooth black with gold lettering. No name, just a single phone number, and the words Bluebird Holdings, the same word he'd used to label the folder on his laptop. I called it. A woman's voice answered. Calm, professional, not surprised. Bluebird. I hesitated. I'm looking for Marcus Henderson. Silence. Then she said, You're Leah. Not a question. Yes. Then you shouldn't be calling here. And the line clicked dead. I stared at the phone for a long time, then dialed again. This time it went straight to voicemail. This number is no longer in service. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the ring and the notebook spread out. The house dark except for the small lamp over the counter. Every clue pointed back to the same 2 days before the crash. Whatever had happened between Marcus and that woman, it started then and it ended with that accident. I told myself I would drive to Nashville in the morning, find out where Bluebird Holdings operated, find the person behind that voice. But sometime after midnight, I heard a car stop outside. A door shut softly. Then footsteps on the gravel. I turned off the light and crouched by the window. A figure was walking up the path. Tall, wearing a hood. They stopped by the mailbox, looked up at the house for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I waited until their taillights vanished before I breathed again. When I finally lay down, I knew one thing for sure. Someone else was looking for Marcus too. Someone else was looking for Marcus too, and I couldn't tell if they wanted answers or blood. By sunrise, I'd packed a small bag, stuffed my notebook inside, and hit the highway toward Nashville. The radio stayed off. I needed the silence, the hum of the tires, the rhythm of my own heartbeat. Somewhere out there were the missing pieces of a life I thought I understood. I stopped only once for gas. While the pump clicked, I saw a man across the lot watching me from a sedan. Nothing about him stood out except that he didn't look away when I met his eyes. He just nodded, like he'd been expecting me. I paid for the gas and drove off fast enough to make the tires squeal. By the time I reached the address printed on an old invoice from Marcus's files, an industrial park on the edge of the city, the sky had gone gray again. The building that matched the Bluebird label was half empty. Glass front dusty, a faded logo peeling off the door. Inside, a single receptionist sat behind the desk. She looked up, practiced smile, then froze when I said Marcus's name. I just need to know what this company does, I said. She hesitated, fingers tapping the keyboard though the screen was blank. We're a logistics consultancy. Then why did my husband transfer all his money through you? That made her blink. She stood up quickly, said she'd get her manager, and disappeared down the hall. The seconds stretched, then minutes. Finally a man appeared, grey suit, expensive watch, a face that said he was used to being obeyed. Mrs. Henderson, he said, already knowing who I was. Let's not do this here. Do what? He gestured to a side door. Talk. Every instinct told me to leave, but curiosity kept my feet moving. The hallway smelled of dust and copier ink. In the office, he shut the door and lowered his voice. Marcus worked with us on a contract basis. Imports, financial routing, nothing illegal. At least, that's what he thought. But someone higher up used his credentials. When he found out, he panicked enough to empty our accounts. He didn't deny it. He wanted leverage, proof, but he also wanted you safe. He said you'd call, eventually. Call who? Me. The man slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a single photograph. Marcus standing in front of a warehouse, beside a woman in a red coat. Her face was turned just enough for me to see the curve of her cheek, the dark braid. I didn't recognize her. Who is she? The man shrugged. Someone who doesn't exist. No records, no ID, but she signed your name on 3 wire transfers. My stomach dropped. Where is she now? Dead, he said simply. 2 days before Marcus. The room spun. You're saying I'm saying you should stop digging, Mrs. Henderson. Marcus made enemies you can't fight. He took something that doesn't belong to them, and if they think you have it, they'll come for you next. He stood and opened the door. Conversation over. I walked out into the cold air, my hands trembling around that folder. Inside, under the photograph, was a note in Marcus's handwriting. If you get this, eat me. And I failed. Trust the truth, not the story. I sat in my car, reading that line until the letters blurred, wondering which truth he meant, his or the one I was about to uncover. I drove for hours without direction, just letting the highway unwind beneath me until the sun dropped low behind the hills. The note lay open on the passenger seat, edges soft from how many times I'd picked it up. Trust the truth, not the story. Those words kept circling in my mind like a riddle I couldn't untangle. Marcus had always believed stories mattered, how people told them, how they could twist a lie until it sounded clean. Maybe that was the warning. Maybe everything I'd been told since the call was part of the story someone else wanted me to believe. I pulled off at a rest stop, splashed cold water on my face, and stared into the cracked mirror above the sink. The woman looking back at me didn't seem frightened anymore. She looked like someone ready to fight for the answers. When I got back in the car, I called Detective Rowan, the officer who'd first told me about Marcuse's accident. He picked up on the third ring. Henderson, he said warily, you shouldn't be calling me. I already told you. I found proof he was being set up. I cut in. Bluebird Holdings, offshore accounts, somebody forged my name. There was a pause. Where are you? In Nashville. Stay put. I'll send someone to meet you, but something in his voice, too flat, too rehearsed, made me hang up instead. I trusted too many voices already. I decided to find the warehouse from the photograph. If Marcus had been there, maybe something was still left. The address on the back of the photo led me to the outskirts of the city, down a line of cracked pavement that smelled of rust and rain. The warehouse sat at the end, half collapsed, its windows boarded, a sign reading, "Condemned." I parked in the shadows and slipped inside through a loose panel. The air was stale, thick with dust and old oil. My flashlight cut through the dark, catching the glint of something metallic on the floor. It was a small keychain, silver, shaped like a bird. Bluebird. I pocketed it and kept moving. In the far corner stood a metal filing cabinet, dented but not locked. Inside were stacks of paper, shipping manifests, invoices, all stamped with Marcus's initials. And there, tucked between the pages, a flash drive identical to the one I'd found in the mailbox. I turned it over in my hand. The same black casing, same label. Truth. My stomach clenched. Someone had been here after him, someone who wanted these drives hidden or found, I couldn't tell which. Headlights flared across the broken windows then, washing the room in white. I froze. A car door slammed. 2 footsteps. Then silence. I killed the flashlight and pressed myself against the wall, heart hammering. Through the crack in the panel, I saw the same sedan from the gas station idling outside. The man stepped out, phone to his ear, scanning the building. I couldn't hear what he said, but his eyes were searching for something, or someone. When he moved toward the entrance, I ran, not out the front, but through the side, across the gravel, through the weeds. I didn't look back until I was in the car with the doors locked and the engine screaming beneath my foot. The sedan's lights flicked on behind me, then shrank in the mirror as I sped down the road. When I finally reached the motel on the edge of town, my hands were still shaking. I sat on the bed, plugged in the flash drive, and opened the only file it held. A video. Marcus's face filled the screen. He looked exhausted, eyes sunken, voice low. If you're seeing this, Leah, then they know. Everything you've heard about the crash, it's not what happened. Don't call the police. Don't trust Rowan. He works for them. Find the third drive. It's the only way out. The video cut off there. No explanation, no clue where that third drive was. Just static. I sat in the dark, the hum of the motel air conditioner filling the silence, and realized that whatever truth Marcus wanted me to find, it hadn't ended with him. It had just begun with me. I stared at the blank screen until it dimmed itself to black, the faint reflection of my own face staring back like a question I didn't know how to answer. The third drive. That was the last breadcrumb Marcus had left, and whoever had chased him to his death was still moving in the dark somewhere behind me. I powered off the laptop, shoved everything into the bag, and slipped out the back of the motel before dawn. The sky was just starting to turn that thin, cold blue that comes before sunrise. There weren't many people awake in the diner down the road, just the smell of burnt coffee and frying oil. I slid into a booth by the window and tried to map it all out on a napkin. 3 drives, 1 hidden in the mailbox, 1 in the warehouse, 1 missing. If he had followed the pattern, the third might have gone somewhere safe, somewhere that meant something to us. I thought of all the small places we'd called ours, the old church where we met, the lake where he proposed, the storage locker we used when we first started the business. The locker. My chest tightened. Marcus had never closed it. I'd seen the bill in his things weeks ago. I drove there fast, adrenaline drowning out the fear. The place sat behind a chain link fence. Rows of metal doors painted the color of rain. My keys still fit. The smell of cardboard and dust hit me when I pulled the door open. Most of our old boxes were still there. Christmas decorations, old photo albums, Marcus's worn briefcases. I knelt and opened the nearest one. Inside, beneath a pile of ledgers, was a small black pouch, the same kind of pouch he used to keep hard drives in. I unzipped it with shaking hands. Inside was the third flash drive, labeled in his handwriting, The Story. I took it straight back to the car and plugged it into my laptop. A folder opened, filled with scanned documents, contracts, receipts, wire transfers linking Bluebird Holdings to a half-dozen shell companies. And every one of them traced back to the same name. Detective Rowan. I sat frozen. Marcus hadn't been running from criminals. He'd been running from the people sworn to protect him. Rowan was part of it, using his badge to clean their money, using Marcus's company as a front. When Marcus found out, he tried to pull out. They killed him for it. My phone buzzed then. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press the green button. Leah, Rowan's voice said, too calm. You shouldn't have gone to Nashville. I couldn't speak. Where are you now? He asked. We need to talk. There are things you don't understand. I ended the call and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. My pulse was thundering. He knew. He must have had someone following me since the beginning. I started the engine and drove without plan, just away. Away from the highway, away from every place that still had his reach. The flash drives clattered in the glove box as I turned down a narrow dirt road and parked near an abandoned farmhouse. I stayed there until dusk, rereading Marcus's note, the files, everything. If I turned this evidence in, there was no guarantee anyone clean would ever see it. Rowan had connections everywhere, but if I disappeared, they'd win again, bury Marcus's truth with him. As the sun dipped, I pulled out my old camera and began recording my own statement. My own truth. I told everything. About the call, the drives, Bluebird, Rowan's name. My voice shook at first, then steadied. I ended it with a promise. If you're watching this, it means I've done what Marcus couldn't. The truth is out now. I uploaded it, encrypted it, and sent it to every news contact I could find. When the progress bar hit 100%, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Headlights flashed on the horizon then, a single car coming fast up the dirt road, maybe Rowan, maybe someone else. But this time I didn't run. I sat there, the drives in my hand, knowing that whatever happened next, the story was no longer theirs to control. The truth was finally mine. The headlights grew larger until they filled the windshield, a blinding white that swallowed the dark around the old farmhouse. I slid the drives into my jacket pocket and stepped out before the car could reach me. The gravel crunched under my shoes, the smell of dust and cold metal in the air. The car stopped a few feet away. For a heartbeat, I thought it was Rowan, but when the driver's door opened, it was someone younger, a uniformed officer I didn't recognize. His hands were visible, open. "Mrs. Henderson?" "Yes." He took a careful step forward. "You need to come with me. Detective Rowan's been arrested." The words didn't land at first. "What?" "Federal agents raided his office this afternoon. They found the transfers, the shell accounts. Your video hit every major outlet 2 hours ago." He sounded half awed, half terrified. "They're calling you the whistleblower." For a moment, all I could do was stand there with the night wind pushing my hair across my face, trying to catch up to the fact that it was finally over. The truth, Marcus's truth, had reached daylight. At headquarters, everything was a blur of lights and microphones. Reporters shouted questions I couldn't answer. The agent who took my statement spoke gently, almost like a doctor with a fragile patient. He said Marcus had been gathering evidence for months, working with a journalist before Rowan's people found out. The crash hadn't been an accident after all. The car's brake lines had been cut. When they showed me the files recovered from Rowan's laptop, there were copies of emails between him and the same woman in the red coat. Her name was finally clear. Lena Crow, an undercover asset who'd gone rogue when the money started moving. She'd used my identity because it was already on Marcus's forms. I wasn't her target.